All right, you can open your Bibles to Titus chapter 1. Titus 1 will be our lesson this morning. Oh, there we go. All right. Who did their homework? All right. Very good. Very good. The homework is designed to get you in the text. It's basically just fill in the blank and short answer questions that are based right on the text of Titus as it is found in the New English translation, which I have included in the book itself. So the whole purpose is to get you into it. And I have not included the study material into the workbook. That is what I'll actually be presenting today. So if you're looking for it in the workbook, you will not see it in the workbook. So you'll have to either take your own notes or what when it comes to what's going on. But we saw an introduction of Titus last week, and today we're looking at Titus 1, 5 through 16. This is basically instructions. This week our lesson deals with instructions that have been given to Titus by Paul as to what he needs to do while he's there in Crete. And the overarching instruction is to put in order the things that are lacking, kind of finish up what needs to be taken care of. Are you looking for something specific? I got you. No problem. So Paul is instructing Titus to put in order the things that are lacking. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going verse by verse through Titus 5 through 16, and we'll be explaining it along. The reason I left you in Crete. Now, aren't you glad when the Bible does stuff like that? Tells you the reason. This is why I wrote you. This is why I sent you. Sometimes at the end of a lesson, I'll actually try to say, this is what I want you to do. If it's really important, I may say it before the lesson starts. This is what I want you to do. It's really good to have that information. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to try to suss it out, or it's just there. So this is a reason I left you in Crete. It is to set in order the remaining matters and to appoint elders in every town as I directed you. Apparently now, there are churches in some of the main cities. If I had to guess, I would say it was probably in the larger cities, maybe some of those that are on the coastline, maybe some of those cities that would have made a really good place for the Romans or other shipping. Whenever they came there, they could possibly be exposed to the church as a part of that. This was part of Paul's missionary strategy. The opening verses basically sets the entire mission for Titus on Crete. This is what you're here to do. Paul reminds Titus while he was left, or more precisely, I guess he's going into the original word here, dispatched or assigned. I mean, this was something that Paul did through his apostolic authority. And Crete was a bustling commercial hub in the Mediterranean, exactly the kind of strategic location that Paul wanted the gospel to take root so it could grow throughout the Roman Empire. The churches were still in their early stages. And there's a difference between a new church and an established church. How would you describe this church? Would you consider us as a new church or as an established? Yes, it's established. I hope it's established since we have been in this area for 68, 69 years, and we have been in existence for, I don't know, 80 or so years. 1940 is actually when the church started. So we're more of an established church. We have more of a we have a fully working eldership. We have a fully working deaconate. We have a number of ministries already established throughout the church. We actually even have a building in which we meet. That's not necessarily the sign of a church, but you would think that maybe with time that churches would actually have a building or some regular meeting place of some sort. And so the churches, though, that Paul is writing to, they're early in their life. If they have leaders or if they have elders, things aren't going so well in those leaderships because some of the wrong people have found their way into the leadership of the church. And that's why it's really important that Titus appoints some leaders, appoint some elders that will be able to take care of things and maybe reform the church where things have kind of veered off course. The churches there were still in the early stages, needing both completion of unfinished work and reform. The purpose clause, so that you might put in order what was left unfinished, uses a Greek word that carries with the idea of straightening, reforming, or correcting. Obviously, the church needed some correcting. And as we look in chapter 2 and we began to see some of the things that Titus is to teach, we'll see maybe what some of that correcting is. As we continue, Paul empowers Titus with apostolic authority to finish some tasks, to finish some projects, maybe something like appointing elders, while also correcting problems caused by the teachers that are there. This is not a casual to-do list. I've been on 2 main missionary trips. Well, no, actually 4 main missionary trips to the Caribbean, 2 or 3 to Jamaica and 2 to Trinidad. And we went down there with specific goals. We basically set up Bible studies. We had Bible studies all day. We had kind of campaign preaching and singing at night. And then usually the last night we were there, the last day that was there, we kind of took off. We'd go to the straw markets. We'd go do something special. We'd have a little fun. After all, it's the Caribbean, right? So our main job wasn't to go down there and have fun. That's what people say when I say I've been to Jamaica to do mission work. They say, "Oh, tough job, but I guess somebody's got to do it, right?" Yeah, we worked way up there in the mountains where often you had to carry your own water and where the sewage kind of ran in the street and where people were very poor. Don't think of the areas that the tourists go to. But in any event, this was not just like a casual to-do list. I'm sending you to Crete. Titus, you have some fun. Here are a few things, though, you got to do. Now, this is basically a strategic commission. This is something you got to get done while you're there because it's really serious. So the first thing that Titus had to do was to appoint church leaders who are able to instruct the church and correct opponents. The instruction to the church is going to come in chapter 2, and part of 3. But first, he's going to talk about correcting some opponents there. And it takes a special kind of man to be able to provide that kind of leadership, especially in a place like Crete. The pool from which you would be selecting individuals would be very, very shallow, shall we say. The Cretans were not known for their morality. The Cretans were not known for their goodness. And for that reason, Titus had to be especially sure that he selected good, godly people to serve in leadership. He says an elder, did someone say something? Well, keep up the good work. An elder must be blameless. Now, what does it mean to be blameless? Okay. All right, immediately we would say without blame. But are any of us without blame? So blameless here, while it's talking about blame, it's not saying the leader can't be, it's not saying that he must be sinless in order to serve as an elder. The whole idea is that he needs to have a reputation that's unassailable. He needs to have a reputation among those that he will be serving with where there could be no grounds for a legitimate accusation of some sort of wrongdoing. One of the problems that they had there was people who were greedy for gain. Well, you obviously don't need to have an elder selected there in Crete who has had some shady financial dealings in the past, right? You need to be someone, if the church contribution turns up missing, this man is not the first man that you would turn to and say, okay, what'd you do with the contribution? He is blameless in the sense of there is no grounds for any legitimate accusation. And usually he's talking about in these areas. He must be the husband of one wife. He must have faithful children who cannot be charged with dissipation or rebellion. As we look at these, the first personal characteristic that he must be above reproach in is fidelity in marriage. The phrase husband of one wife literally is in the Greek a one-woman man is what it means. And it is a figure of speech that is talking about a man who is faithful to his one wife. Now, I suppose if we want to press this, we could talk about divorce or we could talk about polygamy. But really the point that Paul is getting over here is this must be a faithful man, because sexual infidelity was a problem in the ancient world. It was a big problem among the Gentiles, and it was a problem there at Crete. So if you're going to select someone to be your one of your elders, he needs to be someone who is faithful to his one wife. As we go on, the spotlight turns to the children. They need to be faithful or believing, and the idea is that they are not wild, they are not promiscuous, they are not involved in drunkenness, not involved in excess. The words there in the text mean disobedient and rebellious. This is basically a game plan for most of the youth in Crete. They were running wild. They were doing whatever they wanted to do. And so he says, now when it comes to the man that serves as an elder, not only does he need to be faithful to his wife, but he needs to have children that are not accused of being wild or rebellious, because that was the main issue there with the kids. This was an honor-shame culture, and so a leader's reputation depended on household solidarity. It could very well be that this elder would have the church meeting in his house. And so it was very important that his family were also examples of the Christian faith that he was trying to teach and espouse. In the rough pioneer setting of Crete, where rebellious teachers were pulling people back toward pagan values, leaders needed homes that visibly modeled gospel transformation. All right, so you imagine here on Crete, you have this island of people. I'm not speaking of the island of Crete. I'm talking about you have this small group of people that are trying to espouse Christian values. It's very important to everyone living around and to those who come and who are part of your fellowship that the leaders among that group have families that are also modeling those Christian values. Leaders need homes that visibly model Christian transformation. Now, this is a steeper requirement than 1 Timothy. Let me pause for a moment here. This is another one of my little hobby horses. Oftentimes, when we go to select elders or deacons, we will take the list of elders found in 1 Timothy 3, and the lists that are in Titus 1, and we'll put them together. Now, really, that is not a biblical way to do it. Paul wrote his list to Ephesus to take care of the church at Ephesus. And his qualifications had special application to the church at Ephesus. Paul wrote this list of qualifications to the churches at Crete. And there were special needs there at Crete. So what is Paul doing? Paul is basically arranging, and I believe through the Holy Spirit, but Paul is basically tailor-making these qualifications for the church in which they lived. If we were a church that, say, served in a university setting, where maybe at any given point there might be a building full of PhDs. You know what I'm talking about? Very highly educated people. Maybe people that were involved in the study of the Bible too. I have been in that situation where I have taught in churches where there were former preachers in the audience. And let me tell you what, it always made me feel just a little bit uneasy. Can you see how that might be? It made me feel just a little bit, I don't know, am I really up to this to preach to these guys? So in a congregation like that, Paul might have said you need to make sure that your leaders are able to reach out to every segment of your church. And that would go with the PhDs as well as those who are not. You know what I'm saying? Someone who is able to relate to all ages. That might very well be a qualification. I think that as we put things together as a church and select elders, there may be specific qualifications we want for the Boise Church of Christ that would meet our specific needs in this community. So you can't just willy-nilly put the two lists together because they are tailor-made for the church in which they're sent. I think it's a wonderful place to start because there's a lot of overlap. But that is because the settings in which they were sent are very similar. All right. So okay, that's the end of my uh, rant there. Chapter 1 and verse 7. For the overseer must be blameless as one entrusted with God's work, not arrogant, not prone to anger, not a drunkard, not violent, not greedy for gain. All right, immediately you notice something changes in verse 7. The name of the person being selected is changed. In the previous verse, it was to be an elder. The word elder comes from the word presbyter, which means an older, wiser person. Usually, as someone has established themselves, say, in a Jewish community, they have a reputation of wisdom. They have a reputation for knowing the Scripture. And as a result, they are called an elder of the church. Whenever there is a problem, they will go to him, and he will help arbitrate problems in between them. And he was an older, wiser person. This word now he uses a different word. I think he's talking about the same office, but he uses the word overseer. And the word overseer is episkopos. Is that right? Oh my gracious. Yes, overseer or bishop. I think it's episkopos. They're used interchangeably. An overseer is one, flip the word around. What does an overseer do? They see over things. So it's kind of an administrative task, right? A bishop or an overseer would have been someone who was like putting it in a setting, it might be like a city council member, somebody that is responsible for doing something like that, only in a religious sense. And of course, the third word for elder. What's the third word for elder? I think it's poimenos, which means shepherd. And that has the idea of gently taking care of the weak. So all three refer to the office that we sometimes refer to as elder. Elder, bishop, or overseer, shepherd, or pastor even, is a word that's usually translated from, can all be used. Here we only find overseer and elder used interchangeably. But as we'll say here, one of these, like the elder, may indicate a type of prestige. It's by virtue of his wisdom, by virtue of his age, by virtue of his faithfulness in being able to arbitrate things between people that need arbitrating. He's been given this title of elder. The other is more one of function, which is oversight, taking care business, basically is what he was for. Again, he must be blameless. As one entrusted with God's work, not arrogant, not prone to anger, not a drunkard, not violent, not greedy for gain. The overseer is God's steward, managing the church as God's household. That household metaphor is central in Titus, and it sets up much of the theology that's going to follow. Negative traits are given that are to be avoided. We mentioned arrogant, self-willed. This is kind of... These negative traits are what you will find in the opposition there at Crete. Those who are quick-tempered, those who are drunken, those who are violent, which is, the word there is often linked with drinking. It is not greedy for dishonest gain. The word there is iskon kurdes. I think the King James Version says greedy of filthy lucre. The idea is dishonest gain. These are people that are not just in it to make a buck. It was not uncommon in Bible times for those that served the church as elders to be taken care of by the church, maybe with a stipend or something. They could not be guilty of dishonest gain. They're not in it for the money. They're in it for what they can do for God's people. The last two vices especially echo the Cretan stereotype and the opponent's own behavior. And so Paul says you need to get a different kind of man that's going to be serving the church there. If you're going to manage God's house, you can't act like the worst of Cretan society. The leadership here is about faithful stewardship and not personal profit. Verse 8, instead he must be hospitable. Now we're getting to the positive qualifications. What does the word hospitable mean? Anyone want to help? Yes, it means a lover of strangers. Oftentimes, and it meant opening your home. Many people in these settings, especially if they had some wealth, they would have homes that were large enough to accommodate a number of guests, a number of people. And so it was important that they opened up their homes, they opened up their lives to people. Opening homes was essential for worship. It was essential for fellowship, since the church often met in homes. And it was essential for mission. How else? If you have a missionary coming through, where's the missionary going to stay? You ever put up a missionary in your home? I recall that growing up. Oftentimes a call would go out from the church. We're having a preacher come in to do a meeting. We're going to have a revival, or we have someone that's passing through. Would you open up your home to share a place? He was to be a lover of good. This is again right the opposite of the Cretans, who were basically lovers of self. He was to be a lover of that which is good and to pursue that particular virtue. Self-controlled, upright, holy, and devout, disciplined, self-restrained. These are cardinal Greek virtues that were absent in these Greek Cretans. But these are very important that they are present in the lives of those who would lead God's people. In Crete's raw environment, even these basic virtues needed to be taught because the church was at ground level. Paul is looking for respectable, spirit-marked leaders whose lives visibly counter the surrounding culture. Verse 9, he must hold firmly to the faithful message as it's been taught, so that he will be able to give exhortation in such a healthy teaching and correct those who speak against it. All right, now he moves from personal qualifications. He moves from character. He moves from the man's family. He moves from his character traits. And now he's saying here are some spiritual characteristics he needs to have. He needs to hold on to the faithful message. He needs to know the gospel. He needs to know the Word of God. How else are you going to be able to correct someone if you don't know the Word of God? So he can give exhortation in such healthy teaching and correct those who speak against it. Again, I want to call attention to the word healthy teaching. This is very significant in Titus. This has to do with teaching that brings about the right kind of lifestyle. Good thinking leads to good behavior. Good Bible virtues taught, learned, written on the heart will lead to godly life. That's healthy teaching working its way out in healthy behavior. Here, often the word people who are anxious or zealous or enthusiastic to do good works are indicated here. So they need this for ministry. Um, the message that Paul preaches is called a faithful message, and the men are to be faithful to that message. The commitment equips the overseer for two key tasks. Two tasks, and this is certainly the case of the overseer or the elder at Crete, but I would say it is also the case for elders today. They have two key tasks. They are to encourage and exhort believers with healthy teaching. That's number one. And number two, they are to refute or to correct any opponents that would threaten the church. So they are to be there both to teach and to protect the church from these outward opponents. This verse is crucial because the rest of the letter is organized around these two teaching activities. Here is what needs to be taught. Here is how people will respond. And here are the things you are to say to those who are not teaching these things. Healthy teaching is a medical imagery, and it contrasts with the diseased teaching of the false teachers. The best leaders are not just morally upright, they are doctrinally anchored so they can build up the church and guard it. And this is the dual calling that Paul gives Titus. Number three, then Paul says, once you select these leaders who are qualified, you need to name, they need to be qualified enough to name and engage the opponents there at the church. For there are many rebellious people, idle talkers, deceivers, especially those with Jewish connections. Now, in our introduction, we talked a little bit about the Jewish connections. More will be said, I think, in the verses to follow. This is the problem that makes these qualifications so important. And notice how vividly it's answered. There are not just a few of these folks. There are many rebellious people there in the church. Maybe some within the leadership of the church itself that need to be corrected. This description deliberately contrasts the elder profile. They are rebellious. The elders are not. They are rebellious. The elders' children should not be. They are full of meaningless talk and deception, whereas the elders are supposed to hold fast to what is healthy and what is good when it comes to teaching the church. Especially noteworthy are those of the circumcision group. Who's he talking about there? But Jews. But what particular Jews is he talking about? Pardon? Well, he's talking about those who would say that Gentiles had to be circumcised before they could become good Christians. In other words, in order for you to become a good Christian, you have to first become a Jew. And that's something that Paul taught against. He says, no, Jesus is enough. You come to Jesus. The ceremonial laws, they were all good. Paul still kept the ceremonial laws, if you recall. They're good. He says, but they're not to be bound upon the Gentiles. And so when you look at this together, there are those that were mixing maybe some Jewish elements. It was mentioned Jewish myths. It may have to do with ritual purity. And somehow mixing all of that together with the permissiveness that was a part of Christian culture. Yeah. Christian Jewish community, it was optional. It was optional It was optional whether they did it or not. It was not required to become a Christian. But, you have a Jew, and they're still culturally Jews. They probably still circumcised their children in that. But the point is this something that is required to become a Christian? And Paul says, no. No, that's not required to be a Christian. As a matter of fact, our circumcision is that circumcision of the heart. We had that lesson on baptism recently where we talked about, in a sense, baptism is our circumcision, because baptism is what sets us apart as God's people. And that was from Colossians 2, as I recall. So Paul is not dealing with something hypothetical. Sometimes when we're reading an epistle, we're reading in a letter, we have to reconstruct maybe what's going on. We say, well, maybe what Paul was doing was just kind of warning people. For example, Paul might say, and be sure that you flee fornication, or you flee some kind of sin. That doesn't necessarily mean that that was an acute problem with that person or with that church. That simply means it's a command that's always good to teach. So we may not know exactly what's going on there. But here, this is not hypothetical. Paul really kind of spells out some of the stuff that's going on. And he says, you really need good leaders in the church to navigate you through all of this. So this is an urgent threat to this young church. Verse 11, who must be silenced. The teachers must be silenced. Now that doesn't mean that you go put them down, okay? How do you silence a false teacher? How do you silence a false teacher? Okay. You may want to have a discussion with them. You may want to talk with them. Paul doesn't say to disfellowship these people. Even though he speaks in very harsh terms here, he says what you need to do is you need to correct them. So that's what he's talking about. You need to correct them. That's how you silence someone. It may be good have you ever been in a church service where someone interrupted the preacher, wanted to argue? You have? Yeah, I've had that happen to me. Let's face it, I had an atheist to do that when I was at Canyon View in San Diego. And he stood up in the assembly and he kind of wanted to argue with me. And I dealt with it. I said, well, this is just not the time and place for us to discuss this. You might not want to let someone like that teach until you have an opportunity to talk to them more about their faith. So they have to be silenced. It says they can't continue what they're teaching because they're misleading whole families by teaching for dishonest gain what ought not be taught. So there may be whole families that are being led astray. And remember, what was the heart of the church in those days especially? It was the home. They met in homes. And so if you lead away a whole family, what do? You can lead away a whole segment of the church, especially those that meet in their homes. So they need to be silenced. This kind of mirrors the cultural stereotype of Crete, that there were those that are just there looking for dishonest gain. So Titus says the elders are to use corrective teaching and authoritative rebuke, which kind of gets back to what you had said, but not immediate expulsion. God is always reaching out to his people, even when we get things wrong. He wants us to come back to him. And I believe we, who have been given the responsibility of leadership, need to be as gentle as we possibly can, considering the circumstances, when it comes to people. And I think we should, if we err, I think we should err in that area. Of course, sometimes you just have to say, no, I'm sorry. Uh, we're not going to let you teach that. That's just not right. A certain one of them, in fact, one of their own prophets said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. Can you imagine someone in your family saying that about your family? Always liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. And here is what Paul says in the next verse. And this is a true witness. Paul agrees with him. The prophet who said that was likely Epimenides, but he was very critical of the way the Cretans lived. This stereotype grew out of the Cretans' claim about Zeus's tomb being on the island and their reputation for piracy, warfare, and a lack of self-control. So Paul says this is actually a true witness. He was showing how the behavior was showing the very worst of the Cretan culture and how important it was that the church deal with it. Chapter 1, verse 13, such testimony is true, Paul says. This is a true witness. He says, I've been to Crete. I've seen it myself. This is the way they are as a people. And so for this reason, rebuke them sharply that they may be healthy in the faith. Correct the error so that the lifestyle and behavior may be correct too. I need to hurry because our time is out. The goal of the sharp rebuke, though, in every case, though, has to be restoration. You don't argue with people just for the sake of arguing or winning an argument. The whole point is restoration, to bring these rebels back to a healthy belief and healthy behavior that's rooted in the gospel. Paul says, don't pay any attention to Jewish myths and the commands of people who reject the truth. As we kind of drop on down here, the Jewish myths were probably speculative interpretations about the Old Testament. Human commands probably had to do with various rituals that from the Old Testament, that some were saying you had to keep. And Paul basically says those who are insisting upon these things have rejected the truth. Verse 15, all is pure to those who are pure. But to those who are corrupt and unbelieving, nothing is pure, but both their minds and consciousness are corrupted. What did Jesus say? I think this was regarding the controversy about washing hands. What did he say truly made a person impure? Do you remember that? He says, it's not what you take into the body that makes you impure, but it's what's in your heart that comes out of the body that makes you impure. And go ahead.
Christianity says this is the way it should be for eternal life. When you look at the truth of what was going on with the Christians, everything falling apart was a big mess. All the relationships that we were doing. So this more or less proves the truth of Christian behavior.
Well, true. Yeah. Very good. Thank you for that. It's several times in the scripture it mentions to the pure all things are pure. And this command here probably had to do with about the ritual food laws. And people saying, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to follow these purification laws or you'll be unclean. When Paul is actually saying the opposite's true, those of you that are insisting on these things, you yourself are impure within. Take care of the impurity within, because it's not the ceremonial food laws that make you pure. That's kind of where he's going there. And then finally, verse 16, they profess to know God, but with their deeds they deny him, since they are detestable, disobedient, and unfit for any good deed. So while they may profess that they know God, their actions are denying the very God that they're trying to serve. All right. That's kind of where we are here. My goodness, it just keeps on going, doesn't it? But the idea is you need to select leaders who are kind of the opposite of the Cretan culture, so that they will be able to teach and correct those who are misbehaving. And one of the keys in all of this is healthy teaching, sound doctrine. Healthy teaching will bring about healthy lives. All right, that's all. I also have room for 2 more people to sign up to teach this class this summer. So far, everyone has just said they'll teach once, but I have 2 coming up.